October 24, 1944, Taiwan Strait. The black water erupts in columns of fire. A Japanese tanker splits in two, spilling 10,000 tons of crude oil across the Pacific. 3 miles away, another transport tilts violently, her hull punctured below the waterline. Men scramble across tilting decks as the sea rushes in. But there's no enemy in sight. No surface ships, no aircraft, just darkness broken by flames reflecting off the waves. The killer is invisible. 300 feet of American steel, gliding beneath the surface like a ghost. USS Tang, the deadliest submarine in naval history. And tonight, she's hunting. This is the story of the secret war that starved Japan, a campaign so effective that by 1945, the Japanese merchant fleet was reduced to a quarter of its original size. A war fought in silence, thousands of miles from any support, where a single miscalculation meant death at crushing depths. The United States submarine force represented less than 2% of the Navy's total strength. Yet these underwater predators would sink 56% of all Japanese merchant shipping, more than all other Allied forces combined. Over 1,300 ships, 5 million tons, the economic strangulation of an empire. Japan never saw it coming. They built the world's most powerful battleships, carriers that dominated the Pacific, submarines capable of carrying aircraft across 20,000 miles. But they overlooked one crucial element: merchant ships, the tankers, freighters, and transports that fed their war machine. The Americans didn't, and they had a plan. From Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, from the Sea of Japan to the South China Sea, U.S. submarines would wage unrestricted warfare against Japanese shipping. No warnings, no survivors, just torpedoes in the night and merchant marines who never knew what hit them. But it almost didn't happen. For 18 months, American submarines fired thousands of torpedoes, and most of them failed. This is the story of how the Silent Service overcame catastrophic technical failures, bureaucratic obstruction, and impossible odds to execute the most devastating commerce-raiding campaign in naval history. If you want to see how this war was truly won, hit subscribe. Drop a comment with your thoughts, because what you're about to learn isn't in most history books. Let's dive deep. December 7, 1941. While Japanese carrier aircraft incinerate Battleship Row, 51 American submarines sit intact across the Pacific Fleet. Pearl Harbor's submarine base escapes untouched. Within hours of the attack, these boats receive their orders: unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. No rules, no mercy. President Roosevelt authorizes what Germany had done in the Atlantic: sink anything flying the Japanese flag, military or civilian, without warning. It's a decision that will reshape naval warfare forever. But there's a problem, actually 3 problems. Admiral Thomas Hart commands 29 submarines in Manila, the largest concentration of American undersea power in the Pacific. On December 8th, he sends them hunting for the Japanese invasion fleet approaching the Philippines. The submarines are modern, well-trained, positioned perfectly to devastate the enemy. And they achieve almost nothing. Lieutenant Commander Frederick Warder in USS Seawolf fires spread after spread at Japanese transports. He hears explosions, sees nothing sink, fires again, nothing. When he switches to older Mark 10 torpedoes, suddenly ships start going down. The weapon the Navy spent a decade developing, the Mark 14 torpedo, is defective. It runs too deep, passing harmlessly beneath enemy hulls. When it does hit, the magnetic exploder detonates prematurely, or the contact exploder fails completely. Japanese ships enter port with American torpedoes lodged in their sides, unexploded.
Throughout 1942, submarine commanders file report after report. The Bureau of Ordnance in Washington refuses to believe them. The torpedoes are fine, they insist. The problem is the submarine captains. Meanwhile, the Mark 14 costs lives. USS Sea Lion is destroyed during a Japanese air raid on Cavite Naval Base in the Philippines, the first American submarine lost in the war. Other boats dive into enemy-controlled waters with weapons that betray them at the critical moment. In 1942 alone, American submarines conduct 350 war patrols. They sink only 180 Japanese merchant ships, totaling 725,000 tons. Given the targets available, it should have been triple that number. But Admiral Charles Lockwood, commanding submarines from Australia, suspects the truth. And he's about to prove the Navy's own torpedoes are sabotaging the war effort. The bureaucrats won't like what he discovers.
June 1942, Australia. Admiral Charles Lockwood stands on the pier in Frenteman, watching another submarine return from patrol. The crew is exhausted, frustrated. They fired 16 torpedoes at perfect targets, 14 malfunctioned. Lockwood is done accepting excuses from Washington. He sets up a test that the Bureau of Ordnance can't ignore. His staff fires torpedoes through fishing nets suspended at measured depths. Every single torpedo runs 11 feet deeper than its set depth. The math is devastating. Torpedoes set to hit a ship's keel are passing uselessly underneath. The cause? When the Navy increased the warhead size, making torpedoes heavier, they never adjusted the depth mechanism. Depression-era budget cuts meant they never tested live weapons. Lockwood sends his findings to Washington. The Bureau of Ordnance disagrees on technical grounds. So Lockwood repeats the test. Same results. Finally, in August 1942, the Navy admits he's right. One problem solved. 2 to go. Even with correct depth settings, torpedoes still explode prematurely or fail to detonate. Lieutenant Commander John Scott in USS Tunney has a perfect shot at 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, Hio, Junyo, and Taiyo. From 800 yards, he fires 10 torpedoes. All 10 explode prematurely. The carriers sail away untouched. The magnetic influence exploder is hypersensitive, triggering before reaching the target. By July 1943, Lockwood simply orders it disabled. Use contact detonation only. But even that doesn't work. Lieutenant Commander Lawrence Daspit in USS Tainosa finds the whale factory ship Tonan Maru No. 3 dead in the water, 19,000 tons, alone, defenseless. He fires 4 torpedoes. 2 hit. The ship doesn't sink. He fires 2 more. Direct hits. Nothing. With no escorts in sight, Daspit maneuvers to perfect range, 875 yards, and fires 9 more torpedoes under textbook conditions. 9 direct hits. 9 duds. Daspit surfaces, examines the unexploded torpedoes, and documents everything. Tests reveal the contact firing pin is too delicate. On a direct 90-degree hit, exactly what training recommends, the pin crushes without detonating. At 45-degree angles, 50% fail. 21 months into the war, American submarines are finally getting reliable weapons. And Japan's merchant fleet is about to face hell. January 1943, Pearl Harbor. Admiral Chester Nimitz makes a critical decision. He brings Admiral Charles Lockwood from Australia to Pearl Harbor to command the entire Pacific Submarine Force, COMSUBPAC. Lockwood is aggressive, innovative, and he's already proven he'll fight the Navy's own bureaucracy to get results. Now he has the authority to reshape submarine warfare. And he's not alone. Lieutenant Commander Dudley Mush takes command of USS Wahoo in late 1942. Mush breaks every rule in the submarine playbook.
Instead of cautious approaches from periscope depth, he runs on the surface in broad daylight. Instead of firing from maximum range, he closes to point-blank distance. Instead of retreating after one attack, he stays and destroys entire convoys. His executive officer is Richard O'Kane, the best approach officer in the submarine force. Together, they develop revolutionary tactics. On Wahoo's third patrol in January 1943, they penetrate Wewak Harbor in New Guinea, entering enemy-controlled waters where no submarine should survive. They sink a destroyer and 4 merchant ships in a single day. When Japanese escorts attack, Morton executes a down-the-throat shot, firing torpedoes directly at an oncoming destroyer at suicidal range. The destroyer explodes 400 yards from Wahoo. Morton's aggressive tactics inspire an entire generation of submarine commanders. Lockwood promotes the boldest captains, removes the cautious ones, and gives his skippers freedom to hunt. Then, in January 1943, U.S. codebreakers crack the Japanese merchant shipping code, the Maru Code. Suddenly, American submarines know exactly when and where enemy convoys will be sailing. Traffic patterns, routes, even cargo manifests. The Japanese are sending their ships on predictable schedules with minimal escorts through waters now infested with American submarines equipped with reliable weapons and perfect intelligence. By mid-1943, the components are finally in place. Fixed torpedoes, aggressive commanders, breakthrough intelligence, new submarines rolling off production lines at a rate of 2 per week. The number of U.S. submarines on patrol increases from 13 in 1942 to 43 by late 1944. More than 150 submarines will be operating by 1945. Japan's merchant marine is about to face an underwater wolf pack with perfect information and no mercy. The slaughter is about to begin. 1943, Western Pacific. The statistics tell a brutal story. In 1942, U.S. submarines sank 180 Japanese merchant ships totaling 725,000 tons. Disappointing given the torpedo problems. In 1943, that number doubles. 335 ships, 1.5 million tons. Japanese merchant tonnage drops from 6.4 million tons to 5.3 million tons. But 1944, that's when the killing reaches industrial scale. 603 merchant ships sunk, 2.48 million tons sent to the bottom. In a single year, American submarines destroy more Japanese shipping than in the entire previous war. The Japanese never planned for this. Their naval doctrine focused on decisive fleet battles, massive surface engagements between battleships and carriers. They built the Yamato-class battleships, 73,000 tons each, with 18-inch guns, the most powerful warships in history. They constructed sophisticated fleet submarines capable of crossing the Pacific twice without refueling. But convoy protection, anti-submarine warfare, those were defensive tasks beneath the warrior spirit of the Imperial Navy. The result is catastrophic. Japanese convoys sail with minimal escorts. Their anti-submarine training is inadequate. Their sonar technology lags 4 years behind American equipment. Convoy commanders graduate from civilian maritime schools rather than military academies. There's no centralized convoy system until late 1943, and even then, it's poorly coordinated. American submarine commanders can't believe their luck. USS Flasher attacks a convoy off Indochina on December 22, 1944. Commander George Grider sinks 3 tankers in one attack, Arita Maru and the sister ships Otawasan Maru and Omurosan Maru. Over 40,000 tons of desperately needed oil sinks to the ocean floor. USS Barb conducts surface gun attacks against Japanese coastal shipping, shelling factories and even landing a shore party that blows up a train. the only American ground combat on Japanese home territory. USS Archerfish sinks Shinano. At 72,000 tons, the largest warship ever destroyed by a submarine. She was Japan's newest aircraft carrier, sunk on her maiden voyage. The economic impact is devastating. Japan's economy depends on imported raw materials: oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Malaya, rice from Southeast Asia. By 1944, bulk commodities reaching Japan dropped from 19.4 million tons in 1942 to just 10 million tons. Factories shut down, fuel supplies dwindle, food shipments stop, and the submarines keep hunting.
June 24, 1944, Yellow Sea. USS Tang surfaces in darkness off the coast of China. Commander Richard O'Kane scans the horizon through his binoculars. Dawn is approaching, and with it a convoy of 4 Japanese cargo ships. O'Kane served under Mush Morton on Oahu. He learned everything from the master. Now, commanding his own boat, he's about to execute the most devastating single-day attack of the entire submarine war. Tang closes to 1,000 yards and fires. Tomahoko Maru explodes first, 6,700 tons of cargo ship disintegrating in a fireball. O'Kane immediately targets the second ship. Tainan Maru, 6,800 tons, takes 2 torpedoes amidships and sinks in 4 minutes. Japanese escorts scramble. Tang dives to 400 feet while depth charges detonate overhead. Concussive blasts that feel like hammers against the hull. O'Kane waits, listens. When the escorts move off, he surfaces and finds the convoy again. Nasusen Maru is next. 1 torpedo, gone. Then Kenichi Maru, another 6,900 tons sent to the bottom. 4 ships, 1 day, over 27,000 tons. It's the single most successful submarine patrol in naval history. Tang's third war patrol alone accounts for 10 ships sunk, 39,160 tons total. More than any other submarine patrol by any nation during the entire war. O'Kane's tactics are ruthless. He infiltrates convoys at night, surfacing in the middle of enemy formations where escorts can't track him. His torpedo spreads are calculated to mathematical precision. When escorts attack, he fires down the throat, directly at oncoming warships, a technique that requires nerves of steel. On Tang's 4th patrol, she operates in Japanese home waters off Honshu. O'Kane sinks a passenger cargo ship, a patrol yacht, and the 8,135-ton transport Tsukushi Maru. When escorts close in, Tang goes deep, pushing past test depth to escape detection. By October 1944, Tang has sunk 31 ships totaling over 200,000 tons in just 5 patrols. Post-war analysis raises that to 33 ships and 116,454 tons, making Tang the most successful American submarine of World War II. But O'Kane's 5th patrol is about to become a legend for different reasons. Because on October 24, Tang will fire the torpedo that kills her.
October 23, 1944, Taiwan Strait. Tang surfaces into a target-rich environment. A massive Japanese convoy, 3 tankers, a transport, a freighter, multiple escorts. It's dusk, perfect conditions for a surface attack. O'Kane positions Tang in the middle of the convoy. Escorts are everywhere, but in the darkness and chaos, they can't distinguish the low-profile submarine from their own ships. Tang fires. 2 torpedoes slam into the nearest tanker, exploding beneath the stack and engine room. The ship erupts in flames. A single torpedo punches into another vessel's stern. 2 more torpedoes find their marks on the farthest target. The night becomes an inferno, ships burning, exploding, sinking. Tang reloads and continues the attack. A Japanese transport tries to ram.
O'Kane orders full left rudder, cutting inside the transport's turning circle. The enemy ship passes so close that Tang's crew can see Japanese sailors running across the deck above them. Then something unexpected. The ramming transport collides with a Japanese tanker in the confusion. Both ships lock together, damaged and slowing. O'Kane fires 4 stern torpedoes from 400 yards. The tanker sinks bow first. The transport lifts at a 30-degree angle and slides beneath the waves. Escorts converge. Tang runs at full speed, opening the distance to 6,000 yards. Behind them, a final explosion lights the sky. The wounded transport is gone. The next night, October 24, Tang surfaces near Turnabout Island. Another convoy. 3 large cargo ships with escorts. O'Kane has fired 22 torpedoes on this patrol. He has 2 left. He surfaces to 3,000 yards and fires the second-to-last torpedo. It runs true, slamming into a cargo ship that explodes and sinks immediately. 1 torpedo remaining. O'Kane closes to 600 yards, locks on to the largest remaining target. The entire crew is tense. This is the final shot of Tang's career. After this, they return to Pearl Harbor for refit and well-deserved rest. The torpedo officer calls out the firing solution. O'Kane gives the order. Fire! The torpedo ejects, its motor engaging as it enters the water. And then it curves, coming back toward Tang. October 24, 1944, 11:20 p.m. 20 seconds after firing, Tang's sonar operator screams a warning. The torpedo is running in a circle, porpoising on the surface, its wake clearly visible in the phosphorescent water. It's heading directly at them. O'Kane orders emergency maneuvers. All back emergency, right full rudder. Kang's diesel engines roar, propellers churning the water in reverse. But submarines aren't designed for sudden course changes. The torpedo is faster. 78 men watch death approach at 46 knots. The torpedo strikes Tang's stern at 11:22 p.m. The explosion tears through the after torpedo room, destroying the stern, flooding compartments instantly. Tang begins sinking by the stern, her bow rising as water rushes in. Men in the forward compartment scramble for the escape trunk. The submarine settles on the bottom at 180 feet, deep but survivable for escape. 9 men make it to the surface from the conning tower, including O'Kane. 13 more attempt escape from the forward torpedo room using Mumsen lungs, primitive breathing devices. Only 5 survive the ascent. Japanese escorts converge on the oil slick and floating debris. They pick up survivors at dawn. 9 men total, all that remain of Tang's 87-man crew. Among them, Commander Richard O'Kane, the most successful submarine captain in American history. His war is over. Now begins his ordeal as a prisoner of war. The Japanese interrogate the survivors brutally. They recognize O'Kane from intelligence reports, the submarine commander who sank 33 of their ships. The beatings are severe. The survivors endure 15 months in Japanese POW camps before liberation in 1945. Tang's final tally: 33 ships sunk, 116,454 tons, more than any other American submarine. O'Kane will receive the Medal of Honor for his actions on the final 2 patrols. But Tang isn't the only submarine lost to faulty torpedoes. USS Tullabee is sunk by a circular-running torpedo in March 1944. All hands lost except 1 survivor. USS Grunion may have been destroyed the same way in 1942. The Mark 14 torpedo, finally reliable after September 1943, still claims American lives. The submarine war is merciless, even to its own. 1944, Japanese home islands. While Tang fights her final battle, 200 American submarines wage systematic warfare across the Pacific. USS Wahoo, the submarine that pioneered aggressive surface tactics, is already gone, sunk in October 1943 during a patrol in the Sea of Japan. Dudley Morton and all 79 crewmen died when Japanese aircraft caught Wahoo transiting La Perouse Strait. Morton's legacy lives on in every submarine commander who learned from his tactics. But the war continues. USS Flasher, under Commander Reuben Whitaker, becomes the second most successful submarine by tonnage. She sinks 21 ships, totaling 100,231 tons, including the December 1944 attack that destroyed 3 tankers carrying critical oil from Southeast Asia to Japan. USS Rasher racks up 99,901 tons across 18 ships, including the escort carrier Taiyo and multiple tankers. USS Barb, commanded by the legendary Eugene Fluckey, sinks 96,628 tons and earns a unique place in history. The only submarine to conduct a shore bombardment of Japanese installations and land a demolition party that destroys a train. These aren't random attacks. U.S. Submarine Command coordinates operations with surgical precision. Codebreakers provide convoy schedules. Intelligence analysts identify high-value targets. Tankers carrying oil, transports moving troops, freighters hauling raw materials. Submarines deploy in wolf packs, coordinated groups that attack convoys simultaneously from multiple directions. The Japanese can't defend against boats attacking from different bearings with perfect timing. The statistics are overwhelming. By the end of 1944, U.S. submarines have sunk 492 merchant ships in 1944 alone, 124 tankers throughout the war, critical oil carriers, 320 passenger ships and troop transports, thousands of Japanese soldiers killed before reaching battlefronts. At critical moments, Guadalcanal, Saipan, Leyte, submarines intercept reinforcement convoys, killing thousands of Japanese troops who never reach the fighting. One convoy loses 5 ships and 8,378 soldiers in a single attack. On July 31, 1944, submarines massacre a convoy carrying elements of the 26th Division to the Philippines. Fusomaru sinks with 1,376 troops aboard. Yoshinomaru goes down with 2,482 men. 5 ships totaling 39,063 tons. Gone. Over 83,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors die at sea in 1944 alone. Japan's military can't replace the losses fast enough. Late 1944. Imperial Japan. The economic strangulation is complete. Japan begins the war with 6.4 million tons of merchant shipping, third largest merchant fleet in the world. Their industrial empire spans from Manchuria to the Dutch East Indies, a vast territory rich in resources but dependent on sea transport. Oil from Sumatra and Borneo, rice from Vietnam and Thailand, rubber from Malaya, iron ore from the Philippines. All must travel by ship to Japanese factories. By December 1944, Japan's merchant fleet is reduced to 2 million tons, barely enough to feed the population. Industrial production collapses. The Navy's fuel reserves are so low that major warships sit idle in harbor, unable to sortie. The battleship Yamato's final mission in April 1945 carries only enough fuel for a one-way trip because there's no fuel to bring her home. Japanese shipyards work frantically, building replacement merchant ships. They launch over 3 million tons of new construction during the war. But American submarines sink ships faster than Japan can build them. And it's not just submarines. Operation Starvation begins in March 1945.
B-29 bombers drop over 12,000 aerial mines in Japanese coastal waters and harbors. The mines have a cost-effectiveness ratio of 8-to-1 compared to submarine torpedoes. Shipping to Japan's home islands effectively stops. Food supplies dwindle. Urban populations face starvation. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. Aircraft production drops because aluminum shipments from Southeast Asia never arrive. Weapons manufacturing slows. Training for new pilots is curtailed. No fuel for practice flights. The Grand Escort Command, Japan's belated attempt at organized convoy protection, is created in November 1943. Too late. Too few ships. Too little training. By 1944, they're rushing untrained aviation units into anti-submarine warfare with no prior experience. It doesn't matter. American submarines own the Pacific. Some reports indicate that by early 1945, Japanese merchant tonnage falls below the 2 million tons required just to supply food to the civilian population. Recent research suggests the submarine campaign alone could have forced Japanese surrender even without the atomic bombs. Japan's war economy, entirely dependent on imported resources, is strangled by enemies they never found. The silent killers beneath the waves.
January 1945. Sea of Japan. The final impossible mission. Operation Barney. 9 American submarines, Tunny, Skate, Bonefish, Flying Fish, Bowfin, Tynosa, Spadefish, Sea Dog, and Crevel prepare to penetrate the Sea of Japan through the heavily mined Tsushima Strait. Japanese admirals consider the Sea of Japan their private lake, protected by minefields so dense that submarine passage is suicide. No enemy submarine has successfully penetrated it and returned. The Americans have a secret weapon, FM sonar, capable of detecting mines. Tynosa surveys the minefields around Okinawa first, proving the technology works. Now the submarines will use it to thread through Tsushima's underwater barriers. On June 4, 1945, the submarines enter the strait. For 12 hours, they navigate through fields of moored mines, following narrow channels detected by sonar. One wrong move means instant destruction. All 9 submarines make it through. For 3 weeks, they operate in waters the Japanese consider completely safe. Merchant ships sail without escorts. Targets appear everywhere. The submarines unleash hell. 28 Japanese ships totaling 54,000 tons sink in the Sea of Japan. The psychological impact is devastating. If American submarines can penetrate Japan's most protected waters, nowhere is safe. Bonefish is lost on June 18, possibly to a mine or depth charge attack. The other 8 escape through La Perouse Strait to the north, evading Japanese forces that never imagined submarines could exit that way. Operation Barney is the final proof of American submarine dominance. By this point, submarine targets are so scarce that captains use deck guns against fishing boats and small coastal vessels, anything flying a Japanese flag. The statistics speak for themselves. 1,392 Japanese ships sunk by U.S. submarines throughout the war. 5.3 million tons of shipping destroyed. 540,192 tons of Japanese Navy warships sunk, 30% of their entire fleet. 201 Japanese warships destroyed, including the battleship Kongo, carriers Shokaku, Taiho, Unryu, and Shinano. 48 American submarines lost, a loss rate of about 18%. Every 4th submarine that left port never returned. Yet the men of the Silent Service continued hunting until Japan surrendered. They destroyed an empire without most people knowing they were there.
August 1945. End of war. When Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, the merchant marine that once dominated Pacific shipping routes has been obliterated. Of the 6.4 million tons Japan started with, less than 1.5 million tons remain afloat. Virtually every ship over 1,000 tons has been sunk or rendered inoperative. The famous pre-war shipping lines, Nippon Yusen Kaisha, Osaka Shosen Kaisha, Mitsui Line, exist in name only. When Allied occupation forces arrive in September 1945, they find a seafaring nation reduced to fishing boats and coastal junks. The industrial infrastructure stands idle, no fuel to run the machines, no raw materials to process, no ships to transport goods. Japan's surrender results from multiple factors: atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Soviet entry into the war, conventional bombing of cities, battlefield defeats. But historians now recognize that Japan's economy was already destroyed before August 1945. The submarine campaign, accounting for 56% of all Japanese merchant losses, was the single most decisive factor in economic collapse. Some sources indicate the strangulation was so complete that Japan would have surrendered by late 1945 or early 1946, even without the atomic bombs. Consider the human cost. American submarines killed an estimated 60,000–80,000 Japanese merchant sailors. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers drowned when troop transports were sunk. The indirect deaths from starvation and resource shortages number in the hundreds of thousands. On the American side, 374 officers and 3,131 enlisted submariners died. A 22% casualty rate among submarine personnel, the highest of any U.S. military branch. 48 submarines were lost to enemy action, 2 to friendly fire, and 2 to accidents. The survivors carried scars. Richard O'Kane Hantang's crew endured brutal POW treatment. Many submarine commanders developed psychological trauma, nightmares of depth charges, survivor guilt, memories of Japanese sailors burning in oil slicks. Yet their achievement remains unparalleled. No other military force inflicted such disproportionate damage with such limited resources. Less than 2% of the Navy's personnel accounted for 55% of Japan's merchant marine destruction. They were the killers Japan never found. Until it was too late.
The hidden truth. For decades, the full scope of the submarine campaign remained classified. The code-breaking that enabled submarine operations, magic intercepts of Japanese communications, stayed secret until the 1970s. The extent of torpedo problems wasn't publicly revealed until veteran memoirs appeared in the 1980s. Why the secrecy? Because revealing the intelligence successes would compromise post-war signals intelligence operations. The same code-breaking techniques used against Japan would be used against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Because admitting the torpedo scandal would expose catastrophic failures by the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance, failures that cost lives and delayed victory by potentially 12 to 18 months. Because the unrestricted submarine warfare policy raised uncomfortable parallels with German U-boat tactics that Americans had condemned, sinking merchant ships without warning, attacking hospital ships, though rarely intentional, leaving survivors in the water without rescue attempts. Recent research challenges the traditional narrative in unexpected ways. Some historians now argue that Japanese anti-submarine warfare wasn't as incompetent as portrayed. They simply faced an enemy with overwhelming technological and intelligence advantages. Cryptologic documents reveal that U.S. submarines knew not just convoy routes, but exact ship positions, often within hours of Japanese naval headquarters receiving the information. Japanese escort commanders were fighting blind, while American submarines had perfect vision. The economic analysis has shifted too. Earlier accounts focused on total tonnage sunk. Modern research examines specific cargo types, particularly oil tankers and transport ships. Reports from the era suggest that destroying oil transport alone may have been sufficient to collapse Japan's war economy. The 124 tankers sunk by submarines cut Japan's fuel imports by over 80%. The human dimension reveals uncomfortable truths. Allied submarines also sank ships carrying Allied prisoners of war. Over 10,000 POWs and civilian internees died in submarine attacks. The USS Sturgeon sank Montevideo Maru in July 1942, killing all 1,053 Australian POWs aboard. Submarine commanders had no way to know these ships carried prisoners. The ethical questions remain unresolved. Was unrestricted submarine warfare justified? Did the economic blockade constitute a war crime? How many Japanese civilians died from starvation caused by the submarine campaign? History doesn't provide simple answers, but the effectiveness cannot be disputed.
The aftermath. Richard O'Kane survives Japanese captivity, returns home in September 1945, and receives the Medal of Honor from President Truman in March 1946. He's credited with sinking more ships than any submarine commander in U.S. history, 33 ships totaling 116,454 tons across 10 patrols, 5 in Oahu, 5 commanding Tang. O'Kane continues naval service, rising to Rear Admiral and commanding the submarine school before retirement. He writes 2 books, Clear the Bridge, about Tang, and Oahu, about his time under Dudley Morton. Both become classics of submarine literature. Admiral Charles Lockwood, the man who fixed the torpedo problems and reshaped submarine tactics, receives recognition as the architect of submarine victory. He retires in 1947 and writes several books documenting submarine operations. His leadership proved that operational commanders, not bureaucrats, should control weapon development. The Tang herself rests at 180 feet depth in the Taiwan Strait. In 2007, the U.S. Navy conducts a memorial ceremony at the wreck site. The 9 survivors who endured Japanese POW camps are honored. The 78 crew members who died are remembered. Oahu, sunk in La Perouse Strait in 1943, is discovered by Russian divers in 2006. The U.S. Navy holds a joint ceremony with Russia to honor Dudley Horton and the 79 men who never came home. The submarine force itself undergoes transformation. Diesel-electric boats evolve into nuclear-powered submarines in the 1950s. The tactics developed in World War II, stealth, surprise, unrestricted commerce raiding, become doctrine for Cold War operations. Tang's name lives on. A second USS Tang, SS-563, serves from 1951 to 1980. A third Tang, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine, SSN-805, is currently under construction, continuing the legacy. Oahu's name is also revived for a new nuclear submarine, SSN-806, as is Barb, SSN-804. The Navy recognizes that these boats represent the finest traditions of submarine warfare. Japan rebuilds its merchant fleet after the war, eventually becoming a major maritime power again. But the trauma of 1942 to 1945, when American submarines hunted their ships to extinction, shapes Japanese naval doctrine for generations. They never forget the silent killers who starved an empire.
Legacy. Today, submarine warfare remains one of the most potent forms of naval combat. Nuclear-powered attack submarines conduct operations worldwide, enforcing blockades, gathering intelligence, and projecting power beneath the surface. The lessons from the Pacific submarine campaign endure. Intelligence wins wars. The code-breaking that enabled submarine operations proved more valuable than any weapon system. Modern militaries invest billions in signals intelligence, cyber capabilities, and satellite reconnaissance. Weapons must work. The Mark 14 torpedo disaster demonstrates what happens when peacetime bureaucracy meets wartime reality. Testing matters. Listening to operational commanders matters. No weapon system should enter combat with rigorous real-world validation. Economic warfare is decisive.
The submarine campaign proved that cutting supply lines can be more effective than winning battles. Modern military doctrine emphasizes disrupting logistics, targeting infrastructure, and economic pressure. Small forces can achieve outsized results. Less than 2% of naval personnel destroyed 55% of enemy shipping. Precision, intelligence, and aggressive tactics multiplied combat effectiveness exponentially. But the human cost haunts us. Submariners faced 22% casualties, the highest rate in the U.S. military. They served in steel tubes beneath crushing depths, knowing that damage meant drowning in darkness. Over 3,500 American submariners never came home. Japanese merchant sailors suffered even worse, an estimated 60,000 to 80,000 killed. Many burned to death in oil fires or drowned when torpedoed ships sank in minutes. The unrestricted warfare policy raises questions still debated today. Was targeting civilian shipping justified? What about the 10,000 Allied POWs killed inadvertently? War historians continue analyzing the campaign. New documents emerge from archives. Wrecks are discovered and explored. The full story grows more complex with each revelation. What remains undisputed? The U.S. submarine force executed the most successful commerce raiding campaign in naval history. They destroyed Japan's merchant marine, collapsed the war economy, and helped force surrender, all while operating in the most dangerous environment imaginable. They were the killers Japan never found. If this documentary showed you something you didn't know, hit that like button. Subscribe for more untold history. Comment below with your thoughts. Should submarine warfare be considered differently than surface combat? Thanks for watching. Stay curious, dive deeper. Every event, number, and name in this documentary has been verified through historic and documented sources.